Thinking about taking your therapy practice across state lines? Give a listen and find out what works and what it costs.
Okay, so we're talking about starting a business across state lines. And it's a big deal now because we're talking about the Counseling Compact. The Counseling Compact is, it's the agreement for counselors in different states to basically do business together, right? It's allowing someone from a participating state to come to Texas and not have to get a new license or not have to go through all of the backflips one would need to do, right? So I like to give this example when I talk about this. You have a license that's highly portable, and it's actually two I can think of, right? A marriage license and a driver's license. So when you cross a state line, you don't have to generally remarry someone or take another driving exam and get a different license, right? Nobody's carrying around 50 licenses in their pockets. At least I hope you're not. So those are highly portable licenses, and that's due to the agreements among states to let people do that. It removes barriers, right? Otherwise, we'd have to stop and do all of these things, and it would just be, people would stop traveling. They would stop using highways. They'd maybe stop buying cars, right? So it would greatly impact business and the flow of commerce. So when we think about licensing, we think about a lot of things, including, rules that protect the public, rules that make sure that there are systems and consequences in place for license holders who break those rules, right? So lots of reasons to have a license rather than, say, just a certificate. We often talk about coaching, how coaches, it's a certification. At least in Texas, it is not a license. And so if you have a certificate that says you know how to coach, well, that's great. And you know how to coach. Well, in Texas, you don't need a license to coach. So your certificate is good enough. But with counseling, it's not enough to have a certificate or a diploma that says, hey, I know how to counsel, right? You must also have a license that says you have permission to do that. So the certificate says you can, the license means you have permission to. So when we talk about doing business now across state lines, this is such a hot topic since COVID, right? Because before COVID, if not a lot of us were virtual, and so there was really no thought to starting a business that would be virtual, and I would have several offices or several locations in different states. Well, after COVID, there were lots of agreements among states, and there still are, where counselors, let's say you're a counselor in Texas and you have a client who's in a different state, and there may be some sort of an agreement there that allows you to do a certain number of sessions with that client who's maybe visiting that state or going to school in that state. So it's temporary. And in Texas, LMFTs have even adopted something very similar to that, where someone could have sort of a temporary license. So with the Counseling Compact, it's an agreement among specific states that allows you to do those things. And we've got a great webinar coming up. You need to come here. It's a free webinar with Dr. Kathy Ibanez Lorente, and she is the expert on the Counseling Compact. She knows everything about the compact. So it's awesome because it's going to be a huge fact check over all of the topics we've covered in April, because we've talked about the compact a lot. So when I talk about doing business, I start with the basics. First of all, check to see if you need a license, right? If you are in Texas and you're like, you know what, I am going to open myself up to business throughout the country, all of the states, or maybe you're just saying, no, I really, I live close to Louisiana, so I'd really like to just be able to have a practice in Texas and Louisiana. Well, the first thing to do is to check to see if you need a license to practice in both states, because obviously, at least I'm assuming, this would not be just that temporary agreement I was just mentioning, right? Where you just get a few sessions to counsel, for a little bit. that would be a very shaky foundation to build your business on, right? Well, Louisiana says I can have 2 sessions, so that's my business model. I don't know how many sessions, if any, that Louisiana allows, so don't take my word for it there. But when we talk about building a business foundation, a business plan, and you're planning this, that out of over 5 years, let's say, what do you want that outcome to be? How many do you want? 2 full offices in Texas and Louisiana? Do you want a simply virtual practice in Texas that also covers Louisiana? So thinking about just trying to develop a plain old business plan where you're forecasting out over several years exactly how much money do you want to make, how many clients do you want to see, how many people do you want working for you, all of those, how many hours a week do you want to work, all of those things, that doesn't change whether you're doing in Texas or in multiple states. But number one, you've got to check to see if you need a license. Even when Texas becomes a part of the compact, right? As of this recording today, I'm recording this, it's April 22nd, 2025. We know that the compact is in legislative works, right? It's being talked about, it's being perhaps debated, it's being perhaps set to calendar and voted on, but we're not part of the compact yet. So, and even when we do become part of the compact, there are states out there who they will never be part of the compact. So, are you maybe listening to this and you're an LMFT? Well, the LMFTs aren't going to be a part of the compact. They have no intention of being part of the compact at this point in time. So, you need to check first and foremost what kind of a license you need in the other state where you want to do business, right? So step one, business plan, just like you would do anything else, right? Whether you're going to open a popsicle stand on the corner in your hometown, right? You'd want to do a business plan. What's the demand for popsicles? What do popsicles go for? What's your overhead? What's your profit? What are your projections going to be? You're going to do that, right? Step two, do you need a license? And you have to take one extra 0.5 step. Do you still need a license after the compact has passed? So you need to do your homework to see which states are actually in the compact now or not in the compact, but forecasted to be, right? There are a few states that are like Texas that are debating it and about to be in the compact. But then there are states that have no intention of ever being in the compact, right? So don't make a business plan if you can't do business there. That's step one. Step two. All right. Step three, if you take insurance, see how that works across state lines. A lot of folks are discovering, if they want to be digital nomads internationally, that, yeah, they can do counseling across state lines. They check to make sure in this particular country and the laws were friendly to that and it was all good, but then they discovered that their insurance was like, no go, we're not going to reimburse you in Turkey, or we're not going to reimburse you in Algiers, right? So if you are credentialed with insurance and you did step one beautifully, but you made insurance a piece of that puzzle, you need to do your homework with your insurance to make sure that they would recognize what you're doing as counseling and if they would reimburse it. And then if it's yes, figure out what rate, right? I think, there are going to be different rates for different locations, for different modalities, right? Face-to-face or virtual. Obviously, I'm saying obviously, that's my paradigm for today's talk, that you would be virtual. And then additionally, whether you take insurance or not, check with your malpractice insurance, right? Malpractice insurance is playing catch up with all of this too, right? So imagine you are part of the compact. Let's say you did your homework, you did your business plan, you figured out, okay, this is a compact state. It's going to work once we become part of the compact. I can do this counseling across state lines. Well, I don't know what the rules are. I'm going to pick a state in Ohio, right? And so you start seeing clients in Ohio and you break one of their rules. Someone files a complaint against you in Ohio for this rule breach, and your insurance is like, we didn't know you were counseling in Ohio. We had no idea. So what then? So part of your business plan, right? Steps one, step two, we're on three now, checking with insurance, checking with your malpractice insurance. Now, I haven't even gotten to the good stuff yet. So let's talk about money. I'll start with taxes in your business plan and the business formation. When you sell stuff, right? Like this handy dandy coffee mug from Lampass, Texas, right? Lampass, Texas. If I wanted to sell that coffee mug in Ohio, that would be called a nexus, right? That would be one of my locations. Well, because it's a thing that I can hold and touch, it would be subject to sales tax in Ohio. I would have to track all of that. I would have to make sure I understood, okay, I've got to file sales tax in Texas, and then I've got a location in Ohio. And you might say, but Kate, you're not in Ohio. Well, if I had Amazon drop shipping from Ohio, there's a possibility that I might still owe sales tax from Ohio. Please don't quote me on this. I'm not a tax attorney. So understanding where you need to file taxes, if you need to file taxes, if there are federal and state income tax rules, right? So it's not just counseling, it's not just doing business, right? Because we've talked about this before, and you can go back to other trainings. Texas regards counseling as happening where your clients' feet are. That's where counseling is happening. I don't know about doing business, right? Where do they consider doing business? Where does Ohio consider to be doing business? So understanding this so you can form your business in the right way, DBA, S Corp, LLC, PLLC, what that needs to look like as you now you are a multi-state business with multiple locations, or is your location in Texas, but now you're seeing clients in Ohio? And does Ohio call that doing business in Ohio? I don't know. That's something you would have to check. So the compact is about portability. It's about where you can practice, where you have permission to practice, right? Business law, taxes, those types of things, that is how the government says you can do business. And oh, by the way, we're going to need a chunk of that. So here's how we want you to do it. So you would need to do your homework as far as your business structure. And then finally, and this is the thing I always bring up, Texas is huge. And I don't just mean in miles, right? Texas is populated. When I hear about counselors who are wanting to stretch their business across state lines, my first thought is, why? Are there not enough people here? Oh, well, I live in a therapist saturated town. I live in a place where there's just no people. Again, I'm thinking, how many people do you need to make your practice full? I mean, even if you were working 20 direct hours a week, right? Because 20 direct hours a week, that's 40 hours of work. Even if we were bumping that up to 30 direct hours a week, right? So that's 30 people a week. That's the same 30 people for 4 weeks times 12 months, give or take, for attrition here and there. I like to say, okay, let's say you needed 300 people, right? 300 people in a year for your practice. And you're trying to market to get 300 people, right? You're not like Amazon or let me think of a different company. I don't know, Leslie Pool Company. You're trying to market to 10,000 people or 10 million people, right? If you live in a state like Texas with a bunch of people, even if you're in rural wherever, and you wanted to market to folks in Dallas or Houston or Austin or South Texas, and you look and you say, wow, how can I get 300 people in a year to click the button to make a consultation so that I can talk to them, I can give them my 10 minutes consultation, I can take them through my opening speech to help them understand what they get from counseling with me. And I can direct them back to my website for all of my resources so that I become and position myself as an expert in my community, right? I mean, as you think about marketing, would you prefer to market to a niche that you know? Or when you think about, well, I'm going to start marketing to people in Ohio. Yeah, I have an assistant in Ohio and they just had a snowstorm. They just had like tornadoes. I mean, there are things going on in Ohio that I know nothing about. And I listen to her and she kind of helps me understand. But marketing is all about making sure that you're attractive to a niche that you know, right? A people, a specialty, maybe people that are available a certain time of day. I know I've talked to you guys about if you market to small business owners who perhaps are available at a specific time of day or a particular day of the week. I've talked to you about maybe those of you who work in the Houston area, working with people who are working offshore, who are, on 4, off 2. So you start looking at things and you think, okay, if I just need 300 people and I live in the most populated state, maybe I just need to adjust my marketing rather than think about going across state lines, right? Because if you heard me talk a couple of weeks ago, this compact works both ways. It's not just about you seeing other opportunities in other states, right? Folks are coming here because we do have a lot of people and they do not see us as oversaturated and they do not see us as having therapist heavy communities, right? They see Texas as a huge opportunity because perhaps they do live in a state that doesn't have a lot of people in it, like Rhode Island, right? Sorry, Rhode Island. I don't even know if Rhode Island's going to be a part of the compact. So that was just an example. So I want you to think about it both ways. And that's what we've been talking about in April. And next week for our coaching, it's just going to be a Q&A. I do want to look at your marketing material. I want to look at your websites. I want you to talk to me about your marketing plans, maybe questions about how your business is structured, things that you're wondering about. Okay, why isn't this working? Right? Because as we think about marketing, I'm going to ask you questions about your ideal client, right? Do you know this person? Do you know where they shop? Do you know where they take their kids on weekends? Do you know what they like to do for fun? What kind of pets do they have? And I do this for me, do some homework. Google ideal client or ideal customer, and it will help you understand as you go through that exercise how marketing really works, right? It's not about taking your fishing pole from your pond to the ocean, thinking, well, there's more fish out there, so I'm going to catch more. No, it's about understanding how to work with a population that you know and making yourself more attractive to that population. All right, I am going to hit the pause button and open it up for questions.
Don't just go big, go smart. Hit subscribe and tune in every week to get the practice and the freedom you actually want.